Well, welcome to Fearless, Wholesome, and Magnificent. I love these series. I just love this series because ultimately that's the natural way of being. It's a presence that is you, that is there, that has this desire to explore, to express, to participate, to engage, to create, to manifest, to learn, to be. And from the space of fearless, wholesome, and magnificent, everything's just this wonder. It's like a child in a playground, just having a wonderful experience. And what's happened to many of us adults along the way is we've learnt what is normal ways of thinking. And I want to be really clear up front, these are illusions. However, I myself, as possibly you do too, in regards have lived through these illusions as though they were more real than our natural state of being. And so often when we're in this play engagement, we're asking at a deep level for you to begin to just realize that this blissful state of being is always present in us. It's just, have we been cultivating relationship with that, or have we been cultivating relationship with the illusions of who we think that we are and what we think into being in the level of our own personal creations from beliefs or co-creations with other people, or of course the mass conscious creation that certainly plays a large role in a lot of this kind of work. So I just get really excited more and more each time, actually, as I'm exploring this myself in deeper levels. So the fearless, when we come to fearless, I mean, what is fearless? Fearless is often people move through perceived fears with anger, or pissed off motions, because if they're more pissed off and more angry than the situation itself, it forces them into action. Or delegating our authority to someone else. So is another way that people deal with things when fear blocks them and holds them in. So they'll delegate their own authority and responsibility to another person, to another being, to even to rules, regulations that don't even necessarily exist as entities, but are certainly felt in the force of what they're asking and requiring. And so as we delegate our authority outside of ourselves, and that provides these fears that we've been living in to be, and we can go into a victim space from this level of thing. It doesn't actually remove the actual fear itself. It just is how we've been navigating through them. There's other ways too, and this is through pretend. So sometimes, this is a fascinating thing in the self-help environment. So pretending, acting as if we're courageous, acting as if we're being authentic, acting as if, we have positive vibrations, acting as if we've got a positive mental attitude. Now this also works. It also works because it navigates the field of our own fears. It doesn't always work, because we'll find we trip ourselves up into the next fear and the next level of fear. However, the very process of acting as if, or having the courage to show up into a situation, we do discover that the fear was more or less an illusion of our own creation. And this is also something to talk about here. So these fears of our own illusions are our interpretations and meaning making of a situation. And in our interpretation and our meaning making, we're setting off a whole lot of triggers that are going off in our body. So we're responding and reacting to these fears as though they're truly real, almost as though they're their own identity in and of themselves, just like a home might be, a place of residence where you open and close doors, you lock them, you open and close windows, Yeah. So fears are often very similar to a structure of a home. It's you can leave that home, but often we go back to the natural, back to the normalized way of being in this home environment. These normalized fears that we just feel that we need to live through or be in because we don't really know how else to be on a consistent basis. And that's what is important here because we're talking about consistency, not about just one-off situations, because everyone can crack a fear just like that because they are illusions. It's when these illusions are felt to be so, so true that we think we have to crack it each and every time. And to some regards, we do. If we're coming from a space where we believe that the fear itself is more powerful than who we really are, more powerful than the love that already is. If, in a sense, this construction, this home construction of a fear, these walls, if you like, are deemed by us to hold something together. Now, there'll always be a reason why. And a lot of the therapies today focus on the reason. Why was that put in place? When was that set up in life? Was it would, and in most cases, they'll find it was a coping mechanism in order to move away from the pain of something and to come back into the pleasure of something, because we do ultimately have those desires to be in pleasure or to be in love, if I can take it to that next level. Now, there are gifts in fears as well, because these illusions of structure, something that we almost respecting like an electric fence, something that's going to zap us if we actually walk through it, or an electric current of some kind. When we constructed these at some level, or when they were given to us at some level, it served a purpose. There's often no doubt about that. It served a purpose. But most often what I discover, and you'll probably find this for yourself, is they were set up at a time in life when we may not have had all of the resources available to us, or all of the supports available to us, or we didn't feel in the know-how and true knowledge and ways of being to be able to connect at a deeper level and therefore be able to walk through that and prove that fear or illusion, that structure, boundary, rule or regulation, as being null and void. So when we find ourselves as adults, one of the most fun things we can do here to effectively bring back our own authority, to take back and to be in the presence of our own responsibility, to emit and to know the true essence of our soul being, even to that level, is the realization that we are always whole and complete. We are indestructible in so many ways. Completely indestructible. Now, the human mortal sense believes in destructibility. Most of these fears are not about death or life. Most of these fears sit around things like respect, trust, rejection, not feeling good enough, non-deserving. I believe truly that the deepest fear that we really hold is the fear of knowing who we really are. Almost fearful of our own magnificence, because it would prove everything else wrong. Everything that we've ever known would become wrong. And there's a huge play in the human psyche about it's really bad to be wrong. If all of our fears were disproved, became null and void, who would we really be then? How would we operate and navigate in the world? what would that sense of fearless and freedom truly place you into? Now, the concept can feel magical, incredible. The reality of that can be a very interesting process. Because the reality of if you were to create and manifest and be within the full scope of your unlimited potential, what then? And I'm going to be the very first to say it's a little daunting as we play this game. Because fascinatingly so for me, it then became not about the identity of what I'll own in the world or who I'll become in the world. It became more about the play and fascination of simply exploring and expressing what I can only really label as divinity. Full freedom and flow within the presence of your very being. And I've always been using the terms, fearless in the unknown. Become fearless in the unknown. And there's a big truth in that I've navigated with as a pointing rod. I'm also discovering more and more that there's more wholeness to that. And it's not necessarily the unknown. The unknown is only pointed to by the logical thinking mind, the mind that desires structure in order to separate things out. In order to place things into some level of form and label. When we come from the divine expression, it is fearless. It is magnificent and expansive, and it is already whole and complete. And although many people at a spiritual level point to now as being the significance of that, my own opening to that has deepened. And I see now as a gateway. Now is the gateway into who you really are. Oh, my whole body's fizzing pretty much with excitement because living in the flow of this is a very, very different experience. Because fearless in the unknown from the logical thinking mind becomes an impermanent nature. It becomes formless and such an expression that everything is known. Or at least accessible. So again, we find ourselves inside of layers, inside of layers, inside of layers. Multiple simultaneous experiences available in the field that is you, or the field that is me. And then this deems that the potential of your own exploration and your own, the word authenticity, would be in the truth of your current moment. where everything that we have deemed to be true from the logical deciding frames, known in form, begin to have less meaning, and therefore we are less attached to them. We see them and perceive them in a completely different way. Because when we are walking through life perceiving from a fear-based frame of reference, a fear-based perspective, there are so many assumptions inside of that. Many of those assumptions is that, first of all, that we're separate, which ultimately is the core of it all. Then that if I'm separate, then other people are separate. And if other people are separate, I know I have agendas, therefore other people have agendas. I have needs, wants, and desires, therefore other people have needs, wants, and desires. And therefore, unless everything's meeting my preconditioned observation of the world, because I don't want to be wrong, I have to make other people wrong. Or, in order to interact with those people, I have this desire to generalize in such a way that becomes a label and therefore a judgment of whether I feel safe in their environment or not, whether I feel safe in my own environment or not. And so I hope you're following me in this transaction of something to notice about ourselves. You see, fears are constructed on the very basis that we have this separate desire nature. And it's perfect, because it's part of that's the exploration that we're here to have. It's all paradoxical in one space. Because we are coming already from an already whole frame. From a magnificence that is so immense that our logical thinking mind cannot comprehend. And the exciting thing here is it invites us to begin to observe and witness ourselves and our expressions in a different way. Now, the fear-filled mind would think that we would fight fear with fear, or fight fear with love, or fight fear with a piece of chalk, right? I'm just making the absurdity of this in truth. Because in that case there, we're still seeing the fear as a structure, as a form that is separate from us. And yet in some way, it's not separate from us. And there's a very fine line between the victim space, who speaks of my fear, my this, my biggest fear, blah, 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 blah. Or the authentic, responsible, life-filled, flowing soul essence that expresses the construction of fear that I had was. What I constructed was. And the reason I did that was. And what I experienced and learnt was. And what I find myself experiencing now is. And I'm so grateful and thankful for that structure of fear that I put in place. Because this is what I learnt about myself during the process. Do you feel the difference in momentum of that? Yeah. Okay, let's just see where we're going to from here. All right. Now we're going to look at wholeness. We're going to look at wholeness, fascinatingly, from one perspective. So if we saw in front of us in our vision a white piece of paper and a hand that came in and drew a circle, we could say that we can see the whole circle. Yeah. So that would be one perspective. Or let's say that out of that circle came a ball shape, a sphere. Then it would be true to say that we have a new perspective, and we can not only see just the circle, but we can see the sphere. And fascinatingly so, no matter how we do it, we can really only see any part of that sphere at any one time. Yeah? Until we broaden our way of being to bring our awareness to all of the sphere from the outside at one moment. And it would be fair to say that that is another perspective. Now, would we know this sphere more if we allowed ourselves to become the sphere, that circle, the ball? So allowing yourself with your awareness to become the sphere, just in a felt sense way of being. And it would be fair to say that now you have a new perspective of the sphere. Adding on to the awareness of that, it is possible to not only be the sphere itself, but also to observe it from all around. So now your awareness has grown to what is inside of the sphere and what is outside of the sphere. Would it be true and fair to say that at that point you have even a broader perspective? Yeah? Well, let's take this to another level. Imagine that you had the capacity, and especially in an awareness and self-aware and felt sense space, to be the observer observing you with the sphere as you're inside the sphere and outside the sphere. So now you're inviting a higher level of awareness to be an observation of you as a separate identity and the sphere as a separate identity, yet fully contained by you, created by you, and surrounded by you. And it would be very fair to say that you now have another and newer perspective of that sphere, more whole and complete. All of that was done without too much meaning making purposely, because of course we could have filled it in and asked the colours of it, make meaning of that, etc., etc. It's just not the purpose of this current exercise. So wholeness is an interesting exploration because what's fascinating is we could take it to another level of awareness and observe that which was observing us, observing the sphere. Whether we went micro down into the tiny minuscule space in all aspects of that, or out into the galactic universe eventually. Wholeness is certainly about current levels of perspective, current levels of awareness. And for me, certainly, it's always growing. And so I'm imagining for you too, being on this deeper journey that you're on, that your levels of wholeness and awareness of wholeness and experience of wholeness is continually evolving. And some of this is mass conscious shift that's taking place. Some of it is your own internal practices. And some of it is yet to be defined, I'm sure. So when we're using the word wholeness and we apply that metaphor, that story, that experience, we can begin to see more and more from an experiential way that wholeness is an evolving process as well. It's an evolution in and of itself. The magnificence and the magic comes in on the fact that you were able to just mentally and from a felt sense way experience and construct and effectively create that experience on the spot in the now. And of course, a lot of this is being done unconsciously by us as we move around in the life that we think into being. Yeah. And so, in some ways, it's about really being kind and loving with ourselves. Instead of judging and taking what I believe is the easiest possible route, the fastest, quickest, and most complete route in your current evolution. And that is when you bring your level of awareness internally, that you simply sink into the fact of the truth that you already are fearless, already whole and a part of the whole. And your magnificence is simply being experienced by you each and every moment of each and every day. So the workshop today is very much about inviting you to explore the inner realms of levels of awareness. Playing with the possibilities. And simply constructing that it is safe to do so. And that all is well. And the more and more that you play with this, the more the more effortless it becomes. Because effectively it starts to create a generative learning process. Learnings that generate and generate and generate. Not always coming to major conclusions, to simply be exploring the field that is you. And if you can hear my puppy squeaking, it's because there is something on his chair and he'd like to get up on the chair. Ah. So may you have the most fun this week, or this month actually, with a fearless, wholesome, and magnificent practice. Deepen your practice. Really encouraging you to deepen your practice. To deepen it in the sense of simply immersing yourself naturally past all of the other constructs that are not you, created by you, but not you. My love and blessings to you, and may you have the most fun this month. And I'd love to hear from you. It'd be really cool to know what you've been doing, what you've been observing, practices that you've been participating in. I certainly have a number of practices that are available, should anybody want to have access to them. So bye for now. Until next time, have the most incredible, incredible day. Being fearless, wholesome, and magnificent. Thank you.